As investors and developers, we see the world differently. This podcast uncovers the untold truths of what it really takes to become a multi-million dollar residential developer. I'm Nathan Battershall. Let's get to work. Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm the host of the show. My name's Nathan Battershall, and we're really privileged today to have Pat from Pro Duplex. Pat's a duplex builder in Sydney. He's becoming really well known, especially niched into that space of duplex, dual occupancy. So I just think we're in for a treat today. So welcome to the podcast, Pat.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. Glad to be here. Really excited to talk about all things duplex and construction and property development.
Definitely. So look, it'd be good to get to know a little bit about you. I know you recently got married. You got a little bub on the way. You got the ring on the finger.
Got the ring on the finger.
All set.
Yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, sort of what got you into, especially niching into duplexes. A little bit about your company as well, just to kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Sydney. Grew up in southwest Sydney in an area called Cabramatta. Moved to St. John's Park, which was a neighbouring suburb, and shortly after, in primary school, I moved to the Hills District, so specifically Castle Hill, then Kellyville, where I grew up most of my life. Finished high school at Cherrybrook Technology High School, so that's still in the Hills area. And in terms of tertiary education, I did civil engineering at the University of New South Wales, where I got to learn everything about engineering and construction. Shortly after that, worked with an apartment builder that focused on high-rise apartments in the city. So that was a really good experience. Got to learn like how builders build in terms of managing large teams and large projects. And shortly after that, worked for a large commercial builder called Built. I'm not sure if you heard of them, but they focus on high-rise offices, hospitals, and also a lot of fit-out projects. And yeah, I always knew that I wanted to go out on my own.
Yep.
Right. So my whole family is into business. We have an entrepreneurial spirit. It's in my blood.
Yep.
And I just thought, you know what, home building is probably the way to go. I think, I have a passion for construction. So yeah, I dived right into home building.
Yep. And in terms of, obviously your company's called Pro Duplex, which is obviously very niche down. What brought you about? What made you want to niche down into creating a building company that specifically specialises in duplexes, which I think is a brilliant idea and a brilliant name too.
Yeah. So it's a funny story of how this happened. So my brother and my dad had a block of land that they wanted to develop into a duplex out in the Hills District. And me being in construction, I was helping them get quotes from other builders just to see how much it would cost to build a duplex. And I was just thinking to myself, why don't I give it a crack? Yep. Why don't I try building it?
Yep.
And, told my brother and my dad, hey, look, I'll build it for free for you. So obviously they'll pay for all the construction costs, but I'll manage it. They don't have to pay me a cent.
Yep. And
I get to learn from the whole experience, and they get a duplex built at a really cheap price.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and from the whole experience, I realized that navigating the duplex planning laws and certification and subdivision at the end is actually quite a complex process. Mm. So I thought, why don't I niche down into duplexes so that I can guide customers and clients all the way through the whole process.
Yeah.
And just help them navigate all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I came about starting Pro Duplex.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. And look, I think obviously a lot of my involvement's very much been from the early stages of a project, but I've found really since COVID with the fluctuation of pricing, and we've seen the cost of construction probably go up 40% the last 3-4 years. So it's tricky. And obviously anyone doing a development or doing a duplex, for example, and we'll probably just talk duplex construction, duplex building for the sake of today's episode being the fact that you specialise in that space. But obviously the whole reason you're doing a duplex build is for some sort of a profit, whether it be to rent one, to hold and sell one, or sell them both. You're obviously doing it for some form of development or investment purpose. So it's quite a tricky space for people when it comes to doing a duplex to sort of make sure the numbers stack up and work. And have you found that having your involvement as the builder early in the piece to help people reverse engineer those numbers is beneficial?
Oh, absolutely. It's you hit the nail on the head. 100% when people build a duplex, obviously it's for a financial gain.
Yeah.
So the last thing you want to do is design a duplex that's really, really expensive, that doesn't suit the context of that neighborhood or that suburb, only to overcapitalize it and not get the return that you were looking for.
Yes.
Right. So, and another issue that I find is that clients come to me, they've already purchased a block of land, only to find that it's not actually duplex compatible.
Yes.
That they can't subdivide it, or a really big one I see is that the land slopes down towards the rear of the property, and they can't get permission from their neighbors to drain stormwater.
Yes.
And to create an easement through the neighbor's
Yep.
property. So, 100%, they should definitely always talk to a duplex design specialist or a duplex builder,
Yeah.
just to help navigate that.
Yes.
And give the project the best chance possible from the start.
Yeah. And I know even on this episode, on this podcast, we talk a lot about having your dream team. And for me, I think more than ever, you need not only consultants early in the piece, because consultants are all well and good to help you navigate the compliance side of things. But like you said, you've got to be able to build this thing and not overcapitalize. And, it's pointless building a high-end duplex in an area where it really just, project or mid-spec is what the market needs and wants.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you see people buy their sites and they just haven't used that team. And I'm telling a lot of people more than ever, like investors and developers and people wanting to do projects, especially duplexes, that you need to have a builder. Like you need to have a builder in your dream team. And I think gone are the days where you're dealing with 10, 15, 20 different builders. My mentality is always have a builder you can trust, have a builder that you want to work with long term, especially a lot of people doing duplexes. You don't just want to do one, you want to do well out of it and move on and do it again and again and again. And I just think it makes sense to have that longevity with a builder that you can trust. Like, are you finding that's sort of where you're trying to head down, of building that longevity with some clients that you can just work with long term?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 100%. You want the dream team, right? You want to build a team: consultants, duplex design specialists, duplex specialist builders.
Yes.
Because what we find is once you do one duplex project and you find that it's profitable, then you want to do another.
Yeah.
Right? You get the profits, you get the capital, and you just want to do more and more and more. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing a lot of mum and dad investors. They dip their toes into property development, and usually, duplex is probably the introduction to property development that's attainable.
Yes.
For the average mum and dad developers.
Yeah.
Going into apartments and townhouses it's probably later down the line.
Yeah.
But if you want to dip your toes in, duplex is where you start.
Yeah.
And definitely they should speak to a builder or a duplex design specialist like yourself.
Yep.
Because we've seen it before. We've done it so many times.
Yeah.
We know what works. We know what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And the last thing you want to do is, go to a designer that doesn't really specialize in duplex. They do commercial spaces. They do granny flats. They do renovations. They do, everything, like every sort of development. But they don't know what would work in that area, what would return the most value for them.
Yeah.
So that's a massive thing.
Yep. Yeah. It's so true. And I think you absolutely nailed that point there around the costing, because I'm sure you've had to do this, and we definitely have, where an architect or someone, or it could have even been a building company, where they've completely missed the brief in terms of, just because you can build a 250 square metre per side duplex on that block in Parramatta, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that that it's feasible. I always say to a lot of people that, you know, you can do a 4-bedroom that's 170 or 160 square metres, or you can do a 4-bedder that's 200, or you can even do a 4-bedder that's 250.
Yeah.
Just because you can build that extra 100 square metres per side doesn't always – in certain areas you can do that, but in some areas you can completely overcapitalise, because 100 square metres of extra build per side, that can really blow the costs out. And if you're not going to get the resale,
it's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
Yeah,
and I'm sure you've had projects come across your desk where some poor person an investor or developers spend all this money to get the plans drawn, to get it fully approved, all of the consultants, engineering, and then you've got to completely go back to the drawing board and start it all over again.
Yeah, we see that all the time, and there's a statistic that says 70% of homes designed are never built.
Yes.
Right. So it's such a big factor, because exactly what you said, what we find is a lot of mum and dad investors, they do make decisions based on emotions, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's their first duplex project. They want it to be beautiful. They want to spend as much money as they can on it because they want natural marble here, for example. Or they want really high ceilings. They want a 250 square meter duplex 4-bedroom as an example. But sometimes that doesn't translate, especially within the context of that area, right? So what we find is, we also find that sometimes clients come to us with DA and CDC approved drawings already.
Yes.
But there's always an opportunity to value engineer that.
Yeah.
Right. Because often we find that they separately engage all the other consultants rather than use the consultants that the builder or the architect recommends.
Yes.
And what we find is the structural engineers, as an example, over design it.
Yeah.
Right. To cover their liability.
Yep.
So they might specify a raft slab or a strip footing slab, when in fact you could have got away with a waffle pod slab and saved $30,000, $40,000, $50,000.
Yep.
So it's always, so exactly what you said, it's so important to engage a builder or a duplex design specialist really early on in the process.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's where we're telling a lot of investor developer clients, especially if they're not a builder developer, which a lot of people are, your mums and dads, or people that are quite successful, profitable in their day-to-day, and a lot of them want this as a side hustle to generate income and wealth for the future on the side. And you get the right team around you, designer, builder, and the rest of the team. For me, I've found the best developers are the ones and investors are the ones who don't micromanage and who get great people around them. Builder, designer, for me, two of the most key people in that team who you can trust, who you can rely on, but who can help do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. And you spoke before just about not being too emotionally invested, because if it is for a profit or a development purpose to generate wealth, you do have to strip that. You've got to strip that emotion back, because although emotion's good in terms of getting the feel of a product, it's not your friend often, though, when it comes to making decisions that are going to move the development forward and ensure that the bottom end of it is highly profitable.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, you're building a duplex based on numbers, right?
Yes.
You want it to be profitable. You don't want to overcapitalize, get too emotionally invested in it. But at the same time, what we see is that we do get quite a lot of clients that come to us that build to live in one side.
That's true.
Right. So
it's a different conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely. Definitely a different conversation. But what we see is that they build to live in one side, and the other side they rent out or they sell. So you can be emotional on the side that you live in because it's personal.
You can spec it up a bit more.
Absolutely. And you can find, really cost-effective solutions on the other side where you don't have to spend too much, but you still deliver a great product that suits the area, and you can maximize your return on investment there.
Yeah. That's great. And you're so right, like a lot of people are doing that, especially younger people now. To get into the market, they need to be able to do a duplex, live in one side, sell the other, lower the mortgage. We've even seen some people obliterate a mortgage by being able to do that type of scenario.
Yeah.
With the idea is you might do it once, twice, 2 or 3 times to get your mortgage right down, so you got no debt.
Yeah.
Which duplexes are such a phenomenal way, aren't they?
That's great.
Just to lower a mortgage. But even have you found it's important working with people knowing their strategy of what they want to do? Because if they do want to live in one side, and for example, if they want to hold one side long term as a rental versus say someone might want to live in one side and then sell the other side, if it's a long term hold versus a short, like a sell quickly, there's even things you can do on that side, because if you're holding it for a long time, you can even pull back on some things, can't you? Like, is if you're not selling it, like if you need to sell it, sometimes you've got to do a few more things to the facade or have some certain finishes that to be able to sell it, not just for a good return, but not have it sitting on the market too long as well.
That's right. Yeah. So if you're looking to sell it, you need to have some features that when the buyers come in, they go, wow, this is amazing. Just a few features. You don't have to overdo it and really spend too much, but a few features on the facade, a few features internally as well. And I would even say, for example, maybe appliances that are well known, right?
Yes.
So when the average buyer comes in, they don't know too much about, like what size studs you use or what the structure of the home is, but what they do recognize are appliance brands.
Yeah.
So if they see something like Fisher and Paykel, Miele, Smeg,
Yeah.
they will instantly can connect to it, and they'll probably think, oh wow, the rest of the home must be built at a really high standard.
Yeah.
Right. So there's all these little tips and tricks. And when we talk about rental properties, you want to choose something that is very low maintenance.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't want to choose natural stone, marble, bench tiles where you'll have to maintain and reseal it every 1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
If you're choosing timber decking as an example, you don't want to choose natural wood where you also have to, sand and reseal every 1 to 2 years. Maybe spend a little bit more, choose something like a mod wood timber deck.
Yep.
Or an eco deck, and you never have to maintain it. It's more durable. You never have to reseal it.
Yeah.
Right. So those are little tips and tricks that we like to, kind of explain to our clients and say, hey, look, spend a little bit more here. Probably don't spend too much here, because that would align with your investment goals.
I like that. That's really good. And in terms of your area, what are some of the areas that you tend to sort of like to build in? Do you build all across Sydney, or have you got specialist locations or suburbs that you tend to target?
Yeah, sure. So we service all of Sydney.
Yes.
But what we find is that a lot of the clients that are coming to us and a lot of jobs that we're doing are around the Ryde and Parramatta Council areas.
Yes.
We're also doing one in Revesby right now.
Yep.
So the more southern areas.
Yeah.
But yeah, we service all of Sydney.
Yeah.
Look, I think Ryde is a great market.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Ryde's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really hot market, and the great thing about Ryde is just to the north and northwest of Ryde. So just to the north, you got Ku-ring-gai Council. To the northwest, you got Hillshire Council.
Yes.
And right now, they have banned the subdivision of duplexes.
Yes.
Right. So if you build a duplex in Ryde, you're not really competing with all the neighbouring LGAs and suburbs around you.
Yeah.
It's just such a great market there.
Yep. Yeah. And even looking at, like, we've got clients that do a fair bit in Ryde, and the numbers are quite good. Like when you see that, provided they get the site for the right price,
yep.
The feasibilities look terrific.
Oh, yeah.
In those areas. So
yeah.
I agree. And what are you seeing in the market? Like what are some of the current things you're seeing? Like in that market, like what are you seeing, for example, in Ryde, or in, like, what's the market looking like?
Yeah, sure.
From a duplex perspective.
Ryde is really hot right now, right? There is a big appetite amongst home buyers and owner occupiers that want to live in Ryde. And they're happy with duplexes.
Yeah.
Right. So you got a 600 square meter block of land, split down the middle, build a dwelling on each side. They don't mind that. They actually enjoy that because they want to live in the area, but they want something that's affordable, right? So they might not be able to afford a single dwelling or a freestanding home, but they want something new as well.
Yeah.
So a duplex is just a really good way to tap into that market. Another thing that we're finding in Ride, right, is that, and this is what a lot of real estate agents have told us, you want to have a bedroom on ground floor,
Yeah.
and you want a bathroom with a shower on ground floor.
Yeah.
And the reason is there's a really big Asian market.
Yep.
There's a lot of ethnic people in Ride,
Yep.
in the Ride Council area,
Yes.
and they have their parents live with them.
Yeah.
So they got the elderly
That's
parents.
massive now, isn't it?
It's huge, huge right now. So if you don't have a bedroom on ground floor, you might be missing out.
Yeah.
You might be missing out to a wider market. And we tell our clients this all the time. Whenever you build a duplex, you want to cater to the widest market possible
Yep.
in that area.
Yeah.
So bedroom on ground floor, shower on ground floor.
Yeah.
That's a really hot tip for the right area.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you say that because I think I'm seeing that spreading to so many different areas, not just Sydney, but even like outer areas now, like Wollongong, Central Coast, Newcastle. Like quite often I find Sydney sets a bit of a trend, and then a lot of sort of suburbs, especially on the east coast, tend to follow that trend. Even in the Shire, it's massive now. Like you have to have that either guest bedroom or master bedroom with the ensuite on the ground floor, because you're right. Like with the affordability now, the cost of living, it's inevitable now that a lot of younger people, even when they're having kids, are still living at home to save up for a mortgage with their like elderly parents. So, or for the empty nester, they can essentially just purely live on the ground floor. And when their kids and the grandkids come to visit, the upstairs can be set aside for them, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely a trend that I'm seeing as well.
Yeah.
Just, 2 or even 3 generations in that one home. And obviously having that separate area of upstairs and downstairs, and having the elderly parents that struggle to get upstairs. Yeah, ground floor bedroom is just key.
Yeah. And it's funny now, isn't it? Like duplexes are, like you said, they're so acceptable now. And you walk through even the ones you've done. I've seen obviously a couple you've done, and they're like houses now. Like, well, we call them duplexes, but they're as big as most of the houses you knock down. I laugh because most of the houses that you knock down to do an infill duplex, each side ends up normally as big as what you just knocked down.
Yeah.
Like, isn't it? Like you generally, like under CDC, most of the time you can get your 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, sometimes even 5 beds now, or like an upstairs rumpus, really beautiful size open plan living areas, our frescoes, even plunge pools, and like in terms of what you guys have been building, are you finding they end up being quite almost like feeling like you're in a house?
Yeah, it absolutely, and you got it's very easy right now to get 4-bedroom, 3 bathrooms, or even 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. There's one that we're doing that we've just completed in Dundas Valley. The one that you guys did for us. That was 5 bedrooms plus a theatre room and 3 bedrooms plus a plunge pool at the back,
massive.
Plus a double height ceiling void in the living and rumpus area. It's just massive. And the way that you guys designed it, we had 3-meter ceilings on ground floor. 2.7-meter ceilings on level 1. So it was just huge. As soon as you walk in, you're just like, wow, this is huge. This is a duplex. Yeah. So I think those are, you can definitely achieve a large duplex. So each dwelling feels like a normal home.
Yeah. That's brilliant. And look, I think one of the things I'm finding a lot of, and I think that's why it's perfect to have you come on, and is because a lot of people are buying a site, or they're looking to buy a site for the purpose of doing an investment. Like a lot of people want to either sell one, hold one, or sell them both. The big thing's making the numbers work and the numbers stack up. Like, what's your process? How are you helping clients early in the piece navigate build costs? Because it's tricky. Like, I'm sure you hear this where people say, "Oh, what's the square meter rate?" But it's not there's no such thing as a square meter rate. We all know that.
Yeah.
Like, some people say it's 3.5, 4.5, 5, whatever it is, depending on the spec of the build. But the problem is there's a lot that goes on below the ground that comes into play, then finishes and all that sort of thing. But obviously the whole purpose why people are doing these sort of developments is they want to make sure that their numbers are stacking up. How are you navigating that space when you've got a blank canvas? How are you finding, like, do you have any tips or advice for the audience who's listening to this, who are either doing projects or are getting ready to do projects? How do they navigate that space to make their numbers stack up when they're doing their feasibilities?
Yeah. Look, I understand so well what it feels like to try and navigate that whole process and make sure that the numbers stack up. I definitely feel for them. It is quite a complex process.
Yeah.
I think the first thing that we got to look at is how much they can even borrow.
Yeah.
If they can't borrow, say, over $1 million, then there's no point to even start. Yeah, as an example, right? And obviously another thing is the area as well. What area are they looking to invest in?
Yeah.
What areas make sense to build a duplex and sell, right?
Yeah.
So first step, definitely look at how much they can borrow. Typically we find that investors already have their own mortgage brokers.
Yeah.
So they can have the initial conversation with the mortgage broker saying, hey, look, here it's my income. Here's how much I have saved. Awesome. I can spend up to $2 million, developing my own block of land and subdividing into duplexes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Right. Then they come speak to us and we can tell them, you know what, $2 million is great. That's the right amount that you want to spend, say, for example, in the right area to design, develop, build, and then sell at the end. That's perfect, right? But there's also something that we help our clients with, and that's a feasibility spreadsheet, right?
Yes.
Or a development feasibility spreadsheet. It's not perfect, right? Because the interest rates are always changing. An example, the interest that they get from one bank versus another is always different as well. But it shows them what their predicted return on investment is if they spend this much on construction, plus all of the other total development costs. So these are things like long service levy, interest rates, stamp duty, real estate agent fees, even marketing when you want to sell it at the end.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we take into account all of these costs, and it will spit out what your return on investment is.
Yep.
And also what the profit or predicted profit is.
Yep.
Right. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. From that whole exercise on that feasibility spreadsheet, you'll be able to see, okay, if I, for example, want to purchase a block of land, how much do I need to purchase it for so that the figures actually stack up?
To hit that margin.
To hit that margin,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and the margin, it depends from, investor to investor.
Yeah.
But what we find is somewhere between 15 to 25% is desirable.
That's it.
But yeah, it just really depends. And what we find is duplex is a relatively low risk investment versus, say, townhouses or high-rise apartments. So
you can bring the margin down.
You can bring the margin down because your risk is a lot lower.
Yes.
And you know that you're going to hit that target unless, for example, the market crashes, which it rarely does.
That's it. And especially if you've, I talk a lot about this, but especially if you've made your feasibility conservative, you haven't pumped up the resales. You've got a lot of research on the resales and you haven't sort of gone the best case scenario in your resales. You've worked it off sort of a lower on that lower side, because I'm sure you found this, that some developers, because they get emotionally invested in a location or in a site, they go and buy a site where they force the numbers to work. So they went off an unrealistic build price. They got sucked into paying too much for a site. And I've seen this more the last couple of years than ever, where people have basically paid too much for the land, but then they expect to try and get the build $200K cheaper than what it should be. to try and win their numbers back when essentially what the problem was, they paid too much for the site.
Yeah.
And so they should have said no to that site.
Yeah.
Have you found that?
Yeah, we find that a lot. But, it all comes back to it being an emotional investment.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to, not having done the numbers at the start.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. But look, if they pay too much for the land, that's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes people do come to us. They go, look, we've got a home design, DA CDC approved. We purchased this much for the land. Yes, we purchased it for a bit too much, but what can we do?
Yep.
Right. And one of the things that we do is we help value engineer the project.
Yeah.
Right. So we might say, you know what, the structural design is overdone.
Yep.
Right. We can find a way to save $50,000 on there,
Yeah.
while still achieving a resale price that is high enough for you to make a profit.
Yep.
Right. As an example, or some of these finishes and appliances that you've chosen are really high end, you can still achieve the same resale price if we tone this down a bit.
Yeah.
And we find ways to save.
Yeah.
So there's, it's not the end of the world, but it does hurt when you overpay for a site.
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
And I guess if you are looking to do this as a long-term either side hustle, or some people do really well and this becomes their main gig, their everyday, their everyday thing where they become full-time developers. But even if it is like a side hustle or a part-time thing to generate wealth, some of the best lessons are ones where you have, you realise that you're a bit too emotional on that first one you did, or you realise that you got sucked in and you paid too much for the site. So, sometimes even just getting out of it, making a little bit of profit, but it's the best lesson for the future to understand the importance of, hey, running your numbers really accurately, in detail before you've even purchased the site. Yeah, where that's the danger. You can go to auctions sometimes and get sucked into
Oh my goodness, yeah.
get sucked into paying too much. But you're right, like that's a really good point. Like there are ways, aren't there, to value engineer and rescue sometimes. Some sites can't be rescued, but there are plenty of ways, aren't there, to rescue a project if some decisions were made that weren't, I guess, in the best interest of a profitable development.
Yeah. There's definitely many ways to rescue a site, but ideally we don't want to get to that, right?
No.
We want to design it in a very cost-effective but smart way from the start of the project. That is the best way that you can achieve the highest return on a project.
Yep.
Right? Is to find the right site, design it the right way that suits the context of the suburb, that caters to the widest market possible, and then deliver it with a reputable builder that will deliver it correctly for you.
Yeah. And I guess sometimes I find it, I really take my hat off to builders like yourself who are doing, these type of developments are great because quite often people think do a duplex. In this market, what's happened sometimes is they go to like a volume type builder, and we've all had clients who've sort of been stung in the volume market side of things where there's a lot of hidden costs and there's a lot of games and tricks. And so I love the custom builder who will work with the client through that process because we know it's a long-term relationship. It's not just doing one project. It's, hey, we want to go on this journey with you for a long time to come.
Yeah.
So have you found sometimes that's where it can be tricky with some people where they have been a little bit burnt in the past by maybe, I'm not picking on volume builders because it's not all volume builders. There's amazing volume builders out there, but I've had hundreds of people I've spoken with over the years who they've been stung by the cheaper volume type builder where everything's just an upsell, everything's a variation, everything's an opportunity. So all of a sudden, that's where they get a big gun shy. Have you found some of that? Like,
we definitely have seen that a lot. But you know what? There's, like you said, there's great volume builders, and just as similarly, there's also custom home builders that are quite unethical. Where they have predatory practices in terms of excluding hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of items in their contract,
Yeah.
hidden clauses, hidden conditions that stings the investor or the mum and dad developer later on.
Yeah.
So, it's not just volume home builders. I mean, yes, I tend to see a pattern where it does tend to be a lot more from volume home builders, but, we find that those are the best clients. Those are the best leads that come to us.
Yeah.
People that have been stung before, where they've learnt the hard way, which is unfortunate, right?
Yes.
They've learnt the hard way that, okay, going with the cheapest upfront price ends up being the most expensive.
Yeah.
Right. And we find they are our best clients because when they come to us and our upfront quote is $100,000, $200,000 more than the cheapest builder or more than the volume home builder,
Yeah.
they are smart enough to compare the inclusions and exclusions,
Yeah.
and find that we're actually cheaper,
Yes.
right, by the
Yeah.
end of it. So, I'll give you an example. We've just signed a duplex job in Revesby. The client showed us a quote that was $150,000 cheaper than us,
Yes.
right? But that day they signed the quotation. They sent us an email saying they've formally rejected the other builder,
Yep.
and they've gone ahead with us.
Yeah.
And that's because they built 2 houses before,
Yep.
one house and one duplex. So they've gone through that whole process.
They've been through the pain.
They've been through the pain,
Yes.
and they don't want to go through it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're 100% right. I've got a lot of clients in a similar boat. They've been through the pain of it, and they want a company, they want a builder they can trust, because it's often with a lot of these people, it's often not a one-off project.
Yeah.
And if you can really turn that experience around and really give people a great experience where everything's upfront, everything's honest, everything's on the table for them to see. You're right. Like I've seen it over and over and over again where maybe a project or maybe a volume type builder has come up with a quote, and on paper it looks like the numbers stack up way better on the feasibility. But you're right. Once you add in all the little hidden costs and things that haven't been included and the opportunities they've got to sting people with those those variations, it ends up a similar price. But quite often you're getting, for me, you want to be working with someone who understands this isn't just for this build. We want to work with you for many years to come.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I like about your model. And I think that's why it works, because you understand it's not just you want to work with this client for life. You want to be able to see them, end up with quite an amazing, profitable project and celebrate that with them and move on to the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like our ideal clients are the ones that build with us again and again. They had such a great experience on the first one, sold it for a great profit, that they just want to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And often the goal is for them to quit their full-time job.
Yeah.
And have this, have this become their full-time job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. And sometimes it is a bit hard to explain to a client that's never built before.
Yeah.
Right. Where they get a few quotes from us and a few other builders. It's really tempting to go for that cheapest quote.
Yeah.
I understand 100%.
Yeah.
Like in their mind, they're saving $100,000 to $200,000 on the cheapest quote.
Yeah.
But
it's very rarely that, is it?
Exactly. It's so important but it's hard though, right? It's hard for them to understand what has been included in one quote versus another quote.
Yeah.
If they've never been through the process, if they're not in construction or design, right?
Yeah.
It is hard. So I feel for them 100%. It is hard to navigate. So podcasts like this, I think it's great. Keep educating the customers, and that's what we do on our Instagram, our TikTok, Facebook, all of our videos. We just want to keep educating, so that by the time the clients come to us, they already know, okay, I got quotes from other builders, but I noticed, they've excluded all these things based on your videos.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. And one thing I've learnt in this game, especially when it comes to duplexes, especially if they haven't bought the site, but even if they have, a lot of people will say, how much to build a duplex on that site? But like, how long's a piece of string? And I get it. That's why some of them might initially go to a volume builder because they've got a preset design, all that sort of thing. But it's still not the set and forget price. Like for me, the question's not how much can I build a duplex for on that site is, I think, the better question to ask. And even for our listeners, I think this is a perfect way to look at a site, look at a development site, is not how much can I build a duplex for, but the question is saying, what return do I need to make on this site? And then that determines what your costs are. And then you can determine whether it can be done.
That's right.
And I think that's one of the problems I've seen the last couple of years is where people are paying too much for a site, or they get themselves into such a position where they're trying to build a duplex for an unrealistic price, or they're trying to go over and above and make a return, make a return that's just not feasible. You're not going to get a builder and if you can find a builder that can build it for that price, I'd be worried. You know, so
that's right.
You know, I think that's an important thing because, and that's where I guess having a builder involved really early in the piece, you can then know, okay, if you got a site in Ryde, or if you've got a site in Revesby, or if you got a site in the eastern suburbs, like, and if they start throwing a number, you know, I can only spend $1 million. Where you're like, yeah, well, you know, it's walk away from the site.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. You got to involve a builder early on. You got to involve a duplex specialist designer early on because we know the numbers.
Yeah,
right. We know what would work.
Yeah,
definitely. But you know, I do feel for clients, especially if it's their first time. You know, there's so much information that they need to take in, and they don't know where to start.
Yep.
Right. And you know, that's where we come in. That's where this podcast comes in.
Yep.
Just keep educating them so they can make the right decisions. And fingers crossed, right, their first development is very profitable and works well, so that they just keep going and going and going.
Yeah. And look, it's a numbers game, isn't it, really? Like, because for me, that's the key. Like, it's before you even buy the site, the numbers need to work. The numbers need to stack up. And you're right. Like, it's a difficult enough space for a builder or a designer or a developer to navigate. But for someone who's never done this, or they're very green in this space, it's tricky. Yeah. It's tricky, and it's hard enough even for a builder to really give you a hard and fast number. And that's why I think it's important to make sure you've got margin. And I guess, have you found that being involved really early in that design phase is important too? Because it means then you can look at it early in the piece, and you know, you can shave the design back, like you said before, strip away some of the emotion, because at the end of the day, square meterage is square meterage. If 30, 40 square meters extra per side, that can blow the cost right out.
Definitely, yeah, you can definitely blow the cost right out, and it's so important to involve a builder early on. You know, I sound like a broken record, but you have to do it, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. In Ryde, we have this client that purchased a site, 855 square meters, so it is a large site, and the land is relatively flat. So one of the recommendations that we had was build a 2-story home. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms on each side. It seems to work in that area, especially along that street, and especially compared to neighbors and what people want to buy in that area. But initially, he was going to create a basement level.
Yes.
But a basement level does not make sense if the land doesn't slope down towards the street, right? Because if you've got a flat block of land and you're excavating, from the street, the car dives directly down into the basement and you're excavating all that space, it's just a huge cost that you don't need you don't need to pay for. So if you have a flat site, take advantage of it.
Yes.
Just build ground floor plus level 1. But if we didn't explain that to him and he didn't engage us early on, the average architect might have just designed that 3-story. Yeah, they might have just done it.
Yeah.
And he's got a budget of about $2.3 million.
Yes.
It wouldn't be feasible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. And like basements are a really good thing. And you touched on something there. Like what do you find? What are the big costs involved in basements?
No,
Do you find like what are some of the big costs that can blow a budget out when it comes to a basement?
yeah. So the biggest cost would be if you run into contaminated soil,
Yeah.
right? Or if you got groundwater when you start digging. So those are huge. And one of the biggest risks with duplexes or any construction job is what's in the ground,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You don't know until you start digging. Yes, you can get, boreholes or core logs done from the geotechnical survey, but generally they only do 1 or 2 boreholes.
Yeah.
So you can see the soil profile, for example, clay to a certain number of meters followed by rock.
Yep.
But you don't really know until you start digging.
Yep.
Right. Another big one is when you start digging your basement level, what if you run into rock?
Yeah.
Right. Rock is very expensive and timely to excavate and remove as well.
Yep.
I was talking about groundwater. If you got significant groundwater, then you got to waterproof those basements.
Yeah.
Right. So that's another big cost. So look, I don't want to vilify basements.
No.
Basements.
They have their place.
Yeah, they have their place, 100%.
Yeah. If
right.
you've got waterfronts or you've got
waterfront, yeah.
areas where you can get that return.
Yeah, definitely. And look, Ryde, I feel like Ryde is probably the starting suburb, or West Ryde, or even Strathfield, where it does make sense to build a basement level.
Yeah.
If your site conditions allow for it.
Yep.
Right. So that's things like your land slopes down towards the street. So there's significant slope. So you want to reduce the amount of excavation that you do, plus reduce the amount of drop edge beams that you do. So
Yeah.
doing a basement there kind of makes sense. It does make sense.
Yep.
But I feel like anywhere further out west where it is, more affordable, as you go further out west, you probably don't want to spend as much money on having that third level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my big tip for basement levels.
That's good. I like it.
Yeah.
And look, I think another key thing, and you probably hear a lot of this too, because we talked a lot about building in different areas, different suburbs, but even within suburbs, different streets can require different spec of build. We hear a lot of this different spec of build, like from, mid-spec, high-end or luxury. Like, can you just talk us through that? Just for the everyday investor, developer, someone wanting to do projects or doing projects from a builder perspective, what sort of things are we talking about? Like what makes a project mid-spec? What makes it, say, higher end or luxury? What are some of the key things?
Yeah, sure. So mid-spec, in my opinion, would be things that are sort of towards the builder range stuff. So you got builder range tiles, builder range appliances. You can still opt for the well-known brand of appliances, but you want to stay towards the lower end within that brand. So for example, you can get a Bosch oven that ranges from $700 all the way to in the thousands or in the few $1,000s, right? So even though Bosch is widely known, you got the lower end, which is the builder's range, and the high end. So mid-spec will be more sort of builder range items. You might have 1 or 2 features here and there. You might have a little bit of stone cladding here, not too much. You might have some battens, so aluminium or timber look battens, also known as modwood or deco battens. And you can have the odd skylight here and there. So that's what I think of when I think mid-spec. Now, when you go to the high-end stuff, that's when you can start to get really fancy with things, right? So you can have curved stone waterfalls as an example. You can have the high-end appliances like Miele. Look, I have my reservations about Gaggenau. Really expensive. In my eyes, I can't justify it, but if you're building a really high-end home, sometimes it does make sense to have that sort of appliance. High-end homes generally have, higher ceilings. So ground floor, you want something higher than 2.7, ideally probably about the 3-meter range. And when you go to level 1, you want something that's 2.7 or higher. Generally, 2.7 is probably sufficient for level 1. I I generally wouldn't go 2.4 meter ceilings on level 1 because it starts to feel small.
Yeah.
So one of the flaws with duplexes are that by nature they're generally quite narrow because you're getting a normal sized block of land, splitting it in half. So typically by nature they're quite narrow. So having that higher ceiling, especially on level 1, where most of the time is 2.4, but if you could somehow stretch it to 2.6, 2.7 for high end homes, it would really open up the space and make it feel very grand.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's really good. And it's like anything, isn't it? You can sometimes then mix the materials, but I think it's important for the investor to know what market they're in and what the market requires, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That is the main thing.
Yeah, look, and I guess in terms of contracts, like what are you finding now is what type of contracts are most investors sort of wanting when it comes to the actual build contract? You've got your different types of contracts. What type of contracts are you finding that most of your clients are going with?
Yeah. So for the listeners, there's two main types of contracts that we see a lot. The fixed price building contract. So that's just the price that they have from the start, and it stays at that value, except for obviously variations, provisional allowances that adds on top.
Yep.
That is the most common one. And the reason why that's the most common one is because it gives the client the most safety.
Yes.
Right? They know that the cost will be pretty much this amount, except for variations. And that's the contract that lenders also want to see.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of lenders won't approve a construction loan unless the builder can provide them with a fixed price contract.
Yeah.
Right. Fixed price lump sum. The other side is cost plus.
Yeah.
And I can see a lot of builders, opting for the cost plus contract just because of, that 40% material price rise since COVID.
Yeah.
And they want to reduce their exposure there. But I just find that is too risky for the clients.
Yeah.
Right. So for the listeners out there, ideally you want to stick with the fixed price building contract unless you really trust the builder.
Yeah, I was about to say that trust is a big thing, isn't it? After a long while working together, you build that camaraderie, you build that relationship where that could come into play.
Yeah.
Could come into play.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, cost plus contracts do work. So if you build that relationship with the builder over the years, they built a few for you before, you trust their numbers, and they show you their books when they're building their project, and they're happy to do that. Then cost plus could work because if you reduce the risk on the builder, then they would likely give you a better price.
Yeah.
Right. So they will reduce their margin if you de-risk their risk profile.
Yeah.
Right. So definitely has a place there.
Yeah.
But for the everyday Australian, everyday investor, generally it's a fixed price contract.
Yeah. And look, it's always been in my mentality to make sure that my thoughts are you want the builder that you've engaged to do well. You want them to make profit. You want them to do well financially, because I've seen this where you get some investors that might have done 6, 7 or 8 projects and they've used a different builder for every project. And for me, you've got to ask yourself, why is that the case? It could, and quite often it's because they've screwed down every builder they've worked with that they no longer want to work with that client because it was such a poor experience. Or the client continues to pick the wrong builder who burns them.
That's right.
So for me, I just think find a site, find a builder who you can trust, you can build that dream team with. They understand your model and your strategy to generate wealth. You know each other so well that the builder will be able to tell you if that's not a good site, it's a site that's not going to be profitable, and you build that trust, don't you?
You build it from the start.
Yeah. And I think it's in an investor or developer's best interest to make sure that your builder is paid well for what they do, so that they can continue to grow their company to provide better services anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And what I've seen recently, and we've all seen that, we've seen it on the news as well, the insolvency rates for construction companies are at record highs.
Yes.
Right. It's and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. Every month it seems to be going up and up and up. And you got to ask yourself, all right, if I'm choosing the cheapest builder or the builder that doesn't have a reputation on delivering good products and good quality homes, how long would it be before they fold their company and you're left with a half-finished home which no other builder wants to take because they don't want to accept the risk of, having poorly built foundations, as an example, or a poorly formed and poured slab, or a poorly built, framed home. Right? Once the builder folds and you're left with a half-completed home, no builder wants to touch it.
Yeah.
Right? And I just, there's a story. I have a friend who's this was before I became a builder. He opted for a cheap builder.
Yes.
They finished, pouring the slab, building the frames, and the builder folded.
Yeah.
And he's stuck. He for years he couldn't find anyone to finish the job.
Yep.
Every builder that has quoted a few $100,000 more than it should be.
Yep.
And you end up losing your life savings based on one poor decision, trying to save, that $50,000-$100,000 upfront.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but look, I feel for the first time investors, because how do you choose a good builder?
Yeah.
What do you look out for? And there's so many things to look out for. You've probably seen this a lot. Because you've worked with so many builders, you know which builders are good or bad.
Yeah.
But how does the average client look for it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's definitely hard. There are a few things that I would suggest, if they're looking for a builder. One, you want to make sure, actually the first thing you need to look for, check if they're licensed, right? That's the first thing. So go to Service New South Wales, go to builder/contractor license check, and just type in the company name.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yep, they've been around for more than just half a year. Yep, the builder's license been in play for at least a few years.
Yep.
And okay, good. There's no home warranty insurance claims on them from previous clients saying that their work is defective.
Yep.
So that's probably the first step. The second step is, I would say, look at Google reviews or online reviews. Client testimonies as well. So if they can give you a few of their previous and most recent clients, so that you can call and say, hey, look, I'm thinking about building with XYZ Homes or XYZ Building Company. What has your experience been with them?
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably a really good way to get a glimpse in whether the builder is operating in a ethical way, or if they're looking to, give you a really cheap upfront price only to sting you later on.
Yep.
Or another issue is if they take forever to build a home.
Yeah.
Right, because time is money.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with interest rates now. We even see some clients that still do a little bit on private money too sometimes. So especially CDC, you can obviously get it approved a lot quicker now. So we sometimes see people get the land on private money sometimes, or they borrow a little bit of private money to get it over the line. So time is a big factor, isn't it?
Yeah, time is huge. Yeah, we're at record level interest rates. Say over the past 10 years, we got so used to cheap money, cheap interest, and now it's gone really high. And the only way for it to be feasible is if you build it within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you're just bleeding money every week. And one tip that I would advise is negotiate the liquidated damages with your builder.
Yeah.
So for the listeners out there that don't know what liquidated damages are, also known as LDs.
Yep.
LDs is the penalty or the cost that the builder needs to pay you, the client, for every day that they go over their construction duration.
Yep.
Right. So for example, if they say, yep, we'll build the home in 52 weeks.
Yep.
And you get to 52 weeks, but they haven't finished the job, they need to pay you a certain amount of money, whether it's $50, $100. You want it to be a number that's large enough so that it covers a big portion of your cost, plus it hurts the builder enough and it incentivizes them to finish on time.
Yeah. And I guess it's probably a bit of a flag if a builder won't accept that, won't take that on, because straight away you got to say, okay, well, why can't you back yourself to build it within that allotted time frame?
Yeah, that's right. Big red flag if they if they kick and scream when you propose liquidated damages, and look, obviously it doesn't make sense to the builder if you say, okay, liquidated damages at $300 a day, right? It's just, or $400 a day. It's just doesn't make sense for them. It's just too much of a risk. But you just want it to be at a reasonable amount, right? So
enough to help you cover some interest and some of your costs, and but like you said, to incentivize the builders to keep it moving.
Exactly.
And I guess you've probably seen it, and probably even lost out jobs to other builders where they have overpromised and under-delivered when it comes to time, because the dollars is obviously one thing, but I think I've seen that too, where some people, builders will, they don't factor in contingency. Like, my thoughts are, if it's a 6 month build, you're better off telling the client, look, allow for 12. Don't say 6 months if your last 7, 8, 9 builds have taken 9, 10, 11 months.
Absolutely.
So I think that can be the challenge too. And I guess that's where the LDs, liquidated damages, can be a great thing. If they're not willing, if they've said 6 months but they're not willing to accept LDs, well,
big red flag, right?
There's a red flag, isn't there, that they're probably not confident they're going to hit that mark. They wanted to obviously get the project over the line and win that contract by
just over promising, right?
No, it's been good. Well, I'd love to get you back on. There's so many topics and things we can talk about, but just for time's sake, it'd be good just to, one last thought, and even if you can just tell our audience just about how they can best get in touch or find your Pro Duplex. Obviously, we'll be putting your contact details in all the show notes so people can get in touch and inquire, and especially if they're wanting to do a duplex in and around Sydney. Just feel free to share one last thought and then tell us where we can find you.
Yeah, of course. Look, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, find it in the show notes. You can search us up on Google as well. We have a website with the contact form and even my phone number. And look, I think one last thought is try to consume as much knowledge and education around building a duplex, because navigating the planning laws, navigating the whole development life cycle is really complex. So educate yourself as much as possible. Podcasts like these are great. You get a lot of tips and tricks on when it comes to building a duplex and designing it and even acquiring the sites. But also look us up on Instagram. I'm always posting information about the latest planning reforms, about tips and tricks on materials to choose, how to acquire sites, what to look for in a duplex site. So go through all of that, keep educating, keep consuming knowledge. That's probably the best way to do it.
Brilliant. Well, it's been good to have you on, Pat. Always love chatting with you, love your knowledge. And look, thanks for listening in. I hope you got a lot out of this podcast. It was so insightful. Be sure to reach out to Pat and the team at Pro Duplex. And look, if you really enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it, spread the word, share it with other investors, developers, and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you can keep in the loop with what's happening in the industry and stay educated, as Pat mentioned.